This is me, July 29th, 2008. I'm covering all my bases, making sure that if something happens to me or my family, our assets are documented. This is Susan Powell, a 28-year-old mother of two. But this wasn't about insurance. This was a desperate insurance policy. 1 year later, Susan would vanish without a trace. Her husband claimed she disappeared during a camping trip in the middle of winter with their two young sons at midnight. But that wasn't the worst part. 3 years later, her husband would murder their two children and himself in a house fire while a social worker called 911 from the driveway. This is the story of Susan Powell. To understand what happened to Susan, we need to start with the Powell family, because this wasn't just a marriage gone wrong. This was something much darker. Josh Powell was born in 1976 in Washington State, raised in the Mormon church like Susan. But Josh's childhood was troubled. Divorce papers from 1992 revealed disturbing details. Josh attempted suicide as a teenager. He killed the family's pet gerbils and once threatened his mother with a butcher knife. But the real problem? His father, Steven Powell. Steven Powell wasn't just a bad parent. He was a predator. He shared pornographic magazines with his teenage sons. He taught them to view women with contempt. And when Josh brought home his new wife, Susan, in 2001, Steven became obsessed. The young couple was broke, so they moved in with Steven in Washington. That's when things got truly disturbing. Steven filled 17 notebooks with his sexual fantasies about his daughter-in-law. He secretly filmed her around the house. He stole her underwear. He read her diary. He composed love songs about her and posted them online. Listen to what he wrote. "I can hardly control myself when it comes to her. What has driven me in the past year is primarily lust. I have never lusted for a woman as I have for Susan." He filmed this confession. "I just had what is probably the most erotic experience I've had in my entire life. Susan has been feeling ill, and I offered to rub her feet. When I started massaging her legs, her feet were resting in my crotch. She didn't seem to mind at all having me that close. This wasn't just inappropriate. This was a man fantasizing about his son's wife, documenting every moment, convinced she felt the same way." In 2003, Steven finally confessed his feelings to Susan. She was horrified. Josh and Susan immediately moved out, fleeing to West Valley City, Utah, a suburb of Salt Lake City. They cut off all contact with Steven, or at least Susan did. Josh? Not so much. By 2008, Susan and Josh had two young sons, Charles, born in 2005, and Braden, born in 2007. But their marriage was falling apart. Josh refused to attend church with Susan and the boys, a major issue in their Mormon community. He was financially irresponsible, filing for bankruptcy with over $200,000 in debt. And most disturbing, he was becoming controlling, paranoid, threatening. In July 2008, Susan recorded that video we saw at the beginning, but she also wrote a secret will. Here's what it said: "I want it documented somewhere that there is extreme turmoil in our marriage. If I die, it may not be an accident, even if it looks like one." She wrote that Josh threatened to destroy her if she ever filed for divorce, that she feared losing her children, that she feared losing her life. She was documenting everything, her belongings, her fears, her suspicions, because she knew something terrible was coming. 14 months later, she was right. December 6, 2009, a Sunday. Susan attended church that morning with Charles and Braden. A neighbor visited them that afternoon, leaving around 5 p.m. That was one of the last times anyone saw Susan alive. The next morning, December 7th, Susan didn't show up for work at Wells Fargo. Her co-workers called her family. No one could reach her. Josh wasn't answering his phone either. The boys hadn't been dropped off at daycare. Fearing carbon monoxide poisoning, police broke into the house. Susan was gone. But here's what they found. 2 box fans pointed at a wet stain on the carpet. Susan's purse, wallet, and ID still in the house. No sign of Josh or the boys. Then at 6:40 p.m., Josh pulled into the driveway with Charles and Braden. His explanation? They'd gone camping in the middle of the night, in December, in freezing temperatures, with 2 toddlers. He claimed Susan was asleep when they left around midnight. Police drove out to the campsite Josh described. There was no evidence anyone had been there. No tent, no fire, nothing. And here's the thing. Josh had work the next morning. He never called his boss to say he wouldn't be in. When police asked why, Josh said he thought it was Sunday, not Monday. He forgot what day of the week it was, on a work night. On the drive home, Josh claimed he called Susan's cell phone to let her know they'd be late, but her phone was found at the house. Still, when police questioned young Charles, just 4 years old, he said something chilling. "Mommy was in the trunk." Josh quickly corrected him on camera, nervous and sweating. No, Mommy was not with us. If my kids said that, they're lying." Kids lie sometimes, but Charles insisted. And that's when Josh said something that sent investigators' blood cold. If they said she was with us, that would put her out in the Pony Express area. The Pony Express Trail, a desolate area filled with abandoned mine shafts. Within days, Josh's behavior became even more suspicious. 1 week after Susan disappeared, he went to the bank with a power of attorney form and drained all her IRA accounts. He canceled her future chiropractic appointments. Friends came forward with horrifying stories. They said Josh had once discussed in detail how to murder someone and dispose of the body without getting caught. His method? A mine shaft. Josh explained that if you knocked loose some rocks at the top of the shaft, the whole thing would collapse. No one would ever go down there to look. And there were dozens of abandoned mine shafts in Utah's West Desert. Oh, and 2 years before Susan vanished, Josh took out a $500,000 life insurance policy on her. It seemed like a clear-cut case. Josh murdered Susan, dumped her body in a mine shaft, and staged a camping trip as an alibi. So why wasn't he arrested? Because police were still building their case. They needed more evidence. They planned to question him again. But on December 19, 2009, just 12 days after Susan vanished, Josh lawyered up and stopped cooperating. Then he did something even more suspicious. He packed up his sons, moved back to Washington, and moved in with his father, Steven Powell, the same man who had been obsessed with Susan. Living with Steven, Josh started a propaganda campaign. He created a website called susanpowell.org and posted anonymously, claiming Susan had run off with another man. Steven backed him up, pointing to another missing person case in the area, Stephen Kocher, and suggesting Susan and this stranger ran off to Brazil together. It was absurd, but it kept attention off Josh. Then police searched Steven's home and found thousands of secretly recorded images of women and children, including Susan. Steven was arrested and convicted of 14 counts of voyeurism. He went to prison. As a result, Josh lost custody of Charles and Braden. The boys went to live with Susan's parents in Washington. Josh was furious. He was losing control. And on February 5th, 2012, over 2 years after Susan vanished, he did the unthinkable. A social worker brought Charles and Braden to Josh's house for a supervised visit. When they arrived, Josh opened the door and said, "I've got a surprise for you." He grabbed the boys, pulled them inside, and slammed the door in the social worker's face. She immediately called 911. This is a supervised visitation, and something really weird has happened. The kids went into the house, and Josh Powell will not let me in the door. Moments later, the house exploded. Josh had spread gasoline throughout the home. He attacked Charles and Braden with a hatchet. Both boys suffered severe head and neck injuries. Then he ignited the gas, creating an explosion so powerful it shook the entire neighborhood. All three died from carbon monoxide poisoning. Investigators found emails Josh sent minutes before the explosion. He was saying goodbye. Records showed he'd withdrawn $7,000 from his bank account the day before. He donated the boys' toys and books to charity. He'd planned this for days. 1 year later, Josh's brother Michael, who police suspected helped dispose of Susan's body, jumped off a 7-story building in Minneapolis. In 2018, Steven Powell died of a heart attack. Everyone involved in Susan's disappearance is now dead. Police officially closed the case in 2013. They believe Susan's body is in a mine shaft somewhere in the Utah desert. And unless someone stumbles across it by accident, we'll never know for sure. Susan Powell has never been found. Her 2 sons, Charles and Braden, were murdered by their own father to prevent them from ever revealing the truth. And the only video that remains of Susan is that recording from 2008, where she tried to protect herself from the very man who would take everything from her. I'm documenting all our assets, just in case of any emergencies. I hope everything works out and we're all happy and live happily ever after. She never got that chance.